Are those marshmallows in the picture?
I don't think
Oh, they
so.
did look like them, don't they? They're gonna get stale.
I don't know if those are actually.
Yeah, she wants to be a girl.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. How are we all doing this evening? Yay! Well, thank you all for coming out today for our speaker, Eamon Ormseth. My name is Sarah Colley. I am the Community Engagement Coordinator here at the Great Falls Public Library. We are here to serve as a connection point to empower the community and enhance the quality of life by providing individuals access to information and social, cultural, and recreational resources. Just a few housekeeping things before we get started. The bathrooms and the water fountain are out the door and to the right. Our emergency exits are also out the door and to the right, and then to the right again. That's where the stairs are, in which you can also leave this evening after the program. Just as a safety precaution, in case of an emergency, please do not use the elevator. The library does close at 8 o'clock, which is approximately when this program will be ending. And at that point in time, please take the elevator or the emergency stairs and exit the building at that point in time. We will not be doing any checkouts or anything like that after the program if the doors are closed.
Do the stairs exit out that way?
The stairs will bring you up to the kids' place on the first floor.
Oh.
Yeah. So tonight we have Eamon Ormseth. Eamon served as a young adult in global mission at Dar al-Kalima. Did I say that right?
Kalima.
Okay, Kalima, sorry. School in Bethlehem, Palestine from 2017 to 18. On Thursday, January 4th, which is today, he is going to be discussing his experiences living in community with Palestinian Christians, share his thoughts about the prospects for peace in Palestine and Israel, and answer relevant questions about the current situation. He will also provide some resources to learn more about the area. And with that, please welcome Eamon and his turn on the
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. My name is Eamon Ormseth. I'd like to just start actually by having you turn to the person next to you and just tell them the first time you heard the word Palestine or you learned about the word Palestine. If you haven't heard it before, that's okay too, but just take a few minutes, introduce yourself.
I was there. Sunday school.
Last
I had a very strong Sunday school teacher for the
Okay, great. Let's settle back in. Sounds like there was some good conversation. I can tell you the first time I heard the word Palestine wasn't until college, until I met an Arabic professor when I went to school in Missoula. I am from Great Falls. I grew up here, went to CMR, graduated in 2011. Today I'm here to tell you about my experience living in the West Bank, in Palestine, with Palestinian Christians and Muslims. I'm here to speak from my personal experience and then draw some conclusions based on my personal experience. And I should say, you know, I'm not Palestinian, I'm not Israeli, I'm not Jewish, I'm a white Christian guy from Montana. I do speak Arabic fluently and I've studied this for about 10 years. I intend to speak the truth as I see it and just that. And I'm happy to answer any questions afterwards. So thank you for coming again. So I titled my presentation, "A Montanan on a Mission," because I liked the ring of it, and I was technically a young adult in global mission. I was part of a program in the ELCA called Young Adults in Global Mission, which is sort of like, I like to describe it as the Lutheran Peace Corps. They send Lutheran volunteers to various countries around the world in which there's a Lutheran church. You might be surprised to learn there's a Palestinian Lutheran church with about several thousand members. Complicated history, but that was the reason I was sent there. Having known the area and spoken Arabic, they sent me there. Where was that? Here's a map of the Eastern Mediterranean. You can see that whoever made this map put all the names of the countries on the map except for Palestine, because Palestine is not a state, technically. Palestinians are a stateless people. That's part of the reason for the current situation. They do not have a state to protect them. That's a pretty unique situation in international law. Anyone who does go to Palestine has to do a crash course in international law. Did you even know there was a thing called international law? Who enforces it? The answer is there is no global enforcer necessarily. However, I put the word Palestine on here because that's what my community calls it. I lived in the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip is there. I was never able to go to Gaza because it's impossible to go. But I'm going to do some very quick history because it's necessary, not because I want to make this a history lecture, but because I believe it's important to put some things in a political context. About 100 years ago, at the end of World War I, the British Empire made a declaration that they would create a national home for the Jewish people in the Mandate of Palestine, in collaboration with the Zionist movement being a movement in response to European anti-Semitism that said the Jewish people need their own state, they need their own home. That led to increased Jewish immigration to the Mandate of Palestine. Before the Zionist movement began, the population of Jews in the area was 5% or less within the last several hundred years. That increased to about 1/3 of the population in 1948, at which point there was a war. This war, as you'll see in this issue, there's two different names for just about everything. I'm going to generally present the Palestinian perspective because that's the community I lived with, and it's a perspective that is not as often presented in the United States. So the war of 1948 resulted in the creation of Israel. It also resulted in a catastrophe, is what the Palestinians call it. 750,000 refugees that were expelled from their homes and never allowed to return. There was another war in 1967 in which the Israeli army, which Israel, 1948 was here. In 1967, the Israeli army occupied the rest of historic Palestine and assumed control over the civilian population without giving them rights. That's part of the problem until today. The people in West Bank and Gaza are ruled by the Israeli army, but they're not allowed to vote for this regime that rules them. If you want to go to Palestine through the borders, to Gaza, to the West Bank, with the exception of the Egyptian crossing, which is complicated, you have to go through Israeli-controlled borders. It's just the truth. I'm not saying it should be that way or it should be another way. It's the truth. The Israeli army controls that entire territory now. So that resulted in some people pretty unhappy. They didn't have rights, and they revolted in 1987, something called the First Intifada. That led to actually the first attempt at peace. Most analysts would say that failed. It led to another revolt, which became violent, and that led to the current situation in which we are today. The resumption of a violent conflict, killing many civilians and others. Now, we can come back to this at the end. I'm again presenting a perspective, but it is the context in which Palestinians see themselves, generally speaking, and it's important because, in fact, as a Palestinian, you can't separate the political from your life, unfortunately. So, I'm going to use some terminology here as well. Israel is the state of Israel established in 1948. Palestine is the West Bank and Gaza Strip, places under the occupation of the Israeli army. The occupation is the Israeli army's rule over these territories. The Yale CJHL is the church that I lived in, and Yagam is Young Adults in Global Mission. Just to come back to the map. So here's where I lived. I lived in a Palestinian Christian community called Beit Jala. Beit Jala is right next to Bethlehem and Beit Sahor. You know the story of the shepherd's fields, that's Beit Sahor. Bethlehem is, of course, the story of Jesus' birth. And Beit Jala is allegedly where St. Nicholas spent 2 years in a cave. After 1948, many refugees ended up in the area in refugee camps. This was a predominantly Christian area. After 1948, it became kind of 50-50, and it's actually now majority Muslim, Palestinian. You can also see on this map again, I mean, I wish I could just tell you, I went there, I ate some nice food, I had some nice, listened to some nice music, but I had to go through a wall every time I wanted to go to Jerusalem. I had to go through militarized checkpoints. I had to be around soldiers pointing machine guns at me, pointing machine guns at the people I was sitting next to. I stayed on the bus. The Palestinians were ordered off the bus. This is my experience. But what was I doing on a daily basis? I was in a school. I was teaching English in schools operated by the Palestinian Evangelical Lutheran Church. Really joyous classrooms. I love learning languages. As I said, I learned Arabic, and sometimes I spoke Arabic with the kids just to cheat a bit, and so that they would, like me more. But these schools are operated by, as I said, the Palestinian Lutheran Church, and they're actually majority Muslim students. These are like the top schools you want to send your kids to. The public school situation is not great in the West Bank. It's a combination of schools run by the Palestinian Authority and schools run by the UN, and they're underfunded. And so if you can get your kid into a private Christian school, that's the way to go. It'd be like living on the East Coast, I guess, and sending your kid to Catholic school, even if your kid isn't Catholic. Yeah, I was here several days a week, and then one day a week I had to go into Jerusalem, and I had to go through the checkpoint, and that was just the story I told. Here's another picture of me just judging a science project in the classroom. Here's some pictures of me with the teachers. I just took this picture on the left with Micheline. A Muslim woman, you might be surprised to know that many Muslim women don't actually wear the hijab in Palestine. Many do. In fact, it was very uncommon up until the 1990s to wear the hijab in Palestine. This is a teacher on the right, Nabil. This was a day we managed to go to the ocean. Most Palestinians in the West Bank are not allowed to go to the ocean unless they get a very lucky permit. But what the teachers at the school did was they rented a bus and drove to the checkpoint and put me in the front of the bus. And then it worked. The soldiers let us through the checkpoint. So, I guess I was useful for some things there. But, a very good trip, but also kind of sad, like I had a lot more freedom there with my passport than most of my people I was living with. And even that I was, still limited in some ways. So, let me see. I also went to church once a week in the Lutheran church in Beit Jala. Really liked it because it was like a lot of the hymns I used to sing. I actually was raised Presbyterian, but I got involved in the Lutheran church in college. And they were all in Arabic though, so it was a great language challenge. Right there in the middle is the former bishop of the church, and this is some of my congregation in Beit Jala. So, usually when I say I lived there, I say Bethlehem, it's a little more familiar. Beit Jala abuts Bethlehem, and I spent a lot of time in Bethlehem. You wouldn't even know you were going from one city to the other unless you are from there. So we did a lot of spiritual retreats. We did the Places of Jesus. It was a program of the Lutheran Church. So here we are at the Sea of Galilee, of course, the famous place of Jesus walking on water, a place with Palestinian former presence. The main village on the Sea of Galilee was depopulated in 1948 by Zionist militias. However, the main city in the north, Nazareth, was not depopulated in 1948 because of the intervention of the Catholic Church. And it was because it was a Christian city, in a way. So, lots of time for reflection, lots of challenging conversations. Really love all of my fellow Yegum. The word's kind of a mouthful. And they've since changed the word, which might have been a good move. Yeah. So, okay, so food. One of my favorite parts about Palestinian culture is the food. I don't know how many of you have been to the Mediterranean, that kind of shared rhythm of life. Eat meals late, everyone gets together, sits with the family. Extremely important to share meals together. It's something I really miss about, and something that I also brought back home here is kind of that emphasis on community. But I just wanted to explain a few of these dishes. So one of my favorite dishes there, it's called stuffed grape leaves or stuffed vine leaves. You just take a grape leaf and you put some rice in it, maybe a little beef, and you just roll it up and you cook it for a bit, or you steam it, and very delicious, very simple. Ancient recipe. Fresh salad, cucumbers, tomatoes, musakhan, which is like this kind of heated, the word musakhan literally just means heated up. It's a roll. It's very vegetarian-friendly cuisine, actually. It's like meat is kind of eaten as like a ritualistic sort of maybe once a week, even maybe once a month, depending on the family's budget. And frika, which is a sort of a grain with almonds and raisins. So really, food is such a big part of life there. Also, partly because sometimes that's all you can do if there's a curfew and you're not allowed to leave your house, which happens quite often in most cities in Palestine then. So this is my host community. These were my host grandparents on the right, Rima and Kamal. They're Orthodox Christians. Their community their ancestry would date back to the time of Jesus or before. That's how long these people have been there. Christianity is an indigenous religion in Palestine. That's my mom on the right. She came and visited me for Christmas. They fed me a lot. I'm so grateful. I probably would have starved without them. I didn't really know how to cook very well when I was there. I learned to cook because I love the cuisine. I love the dishes. So again, just food being a really, really important part of community there. You can meet someone on the bus and they'll invite you over to their house the same night. And then when you say no and you see them the next day, they'll get mad at you if you're not coming over. And that happened to me several times. Just some guy I met on the bus, I never knew him, but that's a common experience. The hospitality is unreal in Palestinian culture. So, I wanted to show a little bit of one of my favorite dishes. It's called maqluba. Maqluba is a dish made from rice and fried vegetables. So you take some tomatoes and you put them on the bottom of a pan, you put some rice, and then you put a little meat, and you cover it with fried potatoes, then you put another layer of rice, you cover it with fried carrots, another layer of rice with fried eggplant, another layer if you want with fried, maybe more potatoes or something, and you pour in some chicken broth and you cook it for about an hour, maybe a little less, you know how long rice takes to cook. And then at the end, you turn it upside down, and that's what maqluba means in Arabic. It means upside down. So it's one of my favorite dishes. I do know how to cook it now, not as well as Palestinians, but it's always a big reveal. It's like, you have to do it right, and then it just spills out if you've done it correctly, and just so delicious. Like, if you ever get the chance to eat maqluba, you're very lucky. You can become my friend, and I'll make it for you. Or just go to Palestine. So here's part of the reveal. Another thing I like to do another huge thing, there's weddings, as here, weddings. But here in Palestine, the wedding starts at like 10 p.m., because the whole extended family has to get there, and everyone has to be invited. You don't invite someone, shame on you. Even if you go bankrupt, you have to invite everyone. And they dance until like 5 a.m. And Christian Palestinians do drink, but Muslim Palestinians don't. A lot of them don't even drink, and they still dance until 5 a.m. So I learned a lot about from that. This is on the right she's not the bride. Her cousin was the bride, but that was the English teacher I worked with, Lisa. Very wonderful woman, has like perfect English, has never stepped foot in an English-speaking country. Palestinians are one of the most highly educated people in the world because your education is the one thing someone can't take from you. And on the left is her son Sharbo, one of the cutest boys in Palestine. He's really, one of my favorites. And named after like a Lebanese saint, that name Sharbo. So on the left is my fellow Yegam Katie. Here's Lisa's family. Light's not great, but
Could we turn the lights down a little bit?
yeah, maybe we could.
Yes, that would make it.
Let's try.
Oh, there we go. That's great. Wow.
Thank you.
Yeah, so here's Lisa and her many kids. Lisa is also a Christian, Palestinian, Orthodox. Lisa, Lord, that's, in the middle is my friend Hannah. She was another Yegum. Nabil, Shadabel, Nicholas, or Kuku was his nickname. And, gosh, just missed one name. But yeah, it's just kind of another part of my family there. Charbel's birthday, great day. On the right is actually in Jordan. That's in Petra. That's called the Treasury. It's one of sort of the 7 wonders of the world, carved into the ancient cliffside. Over 2,000 years old, I think 3,000 years old. That was just a girl that was giving me a little tour, so, she was a good tour guide. Yeah, one of the activities I got to do, I went to, made some friends in the refugee camp, and they were going rock climbing. There's an American guy from Denver, from Colorado, who went out to Palestine and started a climbing gym, and kind of brought this sport to Palestine, and it really took off. The West Bank is very, very ideal for rock climbing, actually. It has a lot of these, crags. And it's also, really a way for Palestinians to stay connected to the land, because every year Israeli settlers take Palestinian lands, and they use their guns to do it, and they shoot Palestinians that encroach on their settlements. So it is one of the ways that Palestinians actually resist their own colonization. And at the same time, it's also just rock climbing. So this is life as a Palestinian. There is nothing that is not politicized, unfortunately. On the right is the olive harvest, another situation where you just go and harvest olives. Very, again, a joyful kind of part of the rhythm of the seasons. You go, you set up a tarp under the tree, and you get some rakes, or you climb up the tree and you shake the olives. Even some villages still have the ancient olive press. You hitch the donkey to the stone, and it presses the olives. And olive oil being very, very elemental to Palestinian cuisine. The olive tree is a symbol of Palestinian identity because it's very resilient. It can last for hundreds of years with almost no water, and it still produces this very essential vegetable or fruit, whatever you want to call it. And each city brags that their olive oil is the best. And also, another way to stay connected to the land, because the part of the Israeli occupation in the West Bank is common to burn down olive trees, uproot olive trees, and again, many Palestinians are shot by Israeli settlers every year, just trying to access the land that is actually their own. So, unfortunately, that happens sometimes when people try to harvest their olives. This is actually in Jordan again. This is Wadi Rum. If you saw The Martian, you might be familiar with this landscape, a huge open desert valley. The people in this area would be called Bedouins, sort of a nomadic people. Although since the advent of states in the region, they become more settled. But it's still a way for them to kind of connect with their way of life and also earn some money. So very beautiful area. Again, if you get the chance to go to Jordan, Wadi Rum, Petra, really, really incredible. This is an ancient Greek Orthodox monastery carved into this hillside, built into this hillside. This is in the West Bank. And it just shows you the history of that region. This is over 1,000 years old, dating back to the Byzantine era. So here's a picture of me in a field in the West Bank, in the northern West Bank. I joined a group called Right to Movement. It's a group of Palestinians who just go road running. Unfortunately, what am I going to say? There's very few, the Gaza Strip is the longest continuous strip of Palestinian territory in the whole area. The West Bank is so checkerboarded, like Swiss cheese. So they started a group. They said, we want to run a marathon, but there's no 26 miles in the West Bank under Palestinian control. So what they do is they run along the separation wall that Israel built on their land, and they run back. And I ran in the half marathon, very powerful experience. And they're just saying we have the right to movement. We have the right to move and to move around in our homeland, a right that is denied to them. On the right is my mom and my sister at the Mount of Beatitudes up in the north of Israel. And yeah, a beautiful garden tended, maintained by the Palestinian Christian community over the last several thousand years. Here's a picture from the Mount of Olives, the Easter sunrise service. This is a tradition going back, a long time to get up early on Easter. I should note, though, that Orthodox Christian dates and the Western Protestant, and even sometimes the Catholic dates, they differ sometimes, not always. So this was Western Easter. Usually Orthodox Easter is the week after. I don't know why they can't just agree, but, I'm sure there are some people in the audience that could explain that, Council of Nicaea or all that. Yeah, anyways. So that's my sister there again. I'm really happy they were able to come visit me. Just a picture of two Lutheran pastors actually from the United States led that service. Carrie Ballinger and Robert Smith. Here's an ancient terraced hillside. You can see how the olive trees have been cultivated on the hillside. One of the UNESCO heritage sites that's threatened because the Israeli government wants to construct the separation wall through this area, and it's been a site of a lot of activism and peace building and pushing back against that, and some success. It was slightly rerouted, but it gives you a sense of the land and kind of indigenous connection to the land, and how a terraced hillside is like the most easiest but also elemental way to conserve water. And I think sometimes we don't understand that even in the North, even in the Americas, like native peoples have been kind of managing the environment for thousands of years, like planting berries, planting chestnut trees. And that's a similar thing going on here. These olive trees were planted hundreds of years ago, and they're still maintained. And this is a beautiful, hike through the valley. And when I say indigenous people, I'll say very clearly there has always been a Jewish presence in this area throughout the millennia. At certain times there were more, certain times there were less, certain times there were more Christians, certain times there were more Muslims. This land is really can't be owned by anyone, in my opinion. It's holy to all three faiths. I think what's happening now is something else, which I'll get to. I still want to stick to my experience, but yeah. So this is some pictures from Easter, very festive day. Every Easter, the Holy Saturday, Saturday of Light, Palestinian Christians and Christians from around the world gather in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, and magically a flame erupts somehow, and then that flame is then taken to every single church in Palestine, and the Greek government even puts that on a plane and flies it to Greece, and that flame is then used by the priest in each, this is mostly an Orthodox thing, in each church to go and light a candle in each Christian family's house. Really festive, although I should say again, the last year, like many Palestinians, including my own friends, were prevented from going to this ceremony by the Israeli army. So this is a entrance to a refugee camp. I lived right next to a refugee camp called Ida Camp, a camp of people dating that have been living there since 1948, since they were ethnically cleansed from their homes. And this camp is called Ida, which means actually returning, because they believe they will return to their land someday, and that it's their right. This is my friend Khalil from the camp. He's became a very good friend of mine, a Muslim Palestinian. One day we dressed up and sold a bunch of popcorn outside the refugee camp, like very entrepreneurial people, these people in the refugee camp, you'd be surprised. On the right is Khalil and Yafit. Yafit is the daughter of Egyptian Jews that were expelled from Egypt in the 1950s. And Yafit and Khalil and I were invited to her house in Tel Aviv, and we all ate dinner and listened to Egyptian music and spoke Arabic the whole evening. Another aspect of the area that's not always so appreciated is that a sizable majority of Israeli Jews come from Arabic-speaking countries. Yafit and Khalil met through a group called Combatants for Peace, which is a group of former Palestinian militants and former Israeli soldiers who have come together to not coexist, but to co-resist. And that is the context in which this relationship occurred, which I would call a peace building. So there are people on the ground doing this work. You don't hear about them because, you know, if it bleeds, it leads, as they say in the media. So, but wonderful experience. Would love to go and meet them again. Here's some pictures from Ida Camp. The camps are very crowded, densely packed. Infrastructure is not great. Nonetheless, people make meaning out of their experience through art. As you can see, oh, whoops. Okay. On the right is a picture of what Palestinians would call a martyr, or a witness, another term that has a lot of meaning in Christianity, actually. And it's something that you'll see in a lot of areas in Palestine. If someone dies at the hands of Israeli soldiers, their lives are celebrated through public art. So this is Khalil, and this is his cousin, who was shot by an Israeli sniper in the head at the age of 14 years old. Has happened a lot. An American journalist was killed in the northern West Bank. A Palestinian-American Christian journalist, Shireen Abu Akleh, a similar situation. Documentary evidence, pretty clear the Israeli army did it, but you know, the truth still hasn't, there's still been no accountability. So yeah, I mean, this is just, again, a part of being there, as you hear these stories, and they break your heart, honestly. My name is Aboud Shadli, a 13-year-old Palestinian refugee. I was standing just right here hanging with my friends when an Israeli sniper shot me dead. My soul will remain here chasing the killer and motivating my classmates. I wonder whether the international community will bring justice to Palestinian children. Every year the Israeli army puts about 200, 250 children in prison, in military prison in the West Bank. Usually it's for something like throwing stones. The conviction rate is 99%. There's almost no access to good interpretation, and oftentimes the children there's evidence that they've been tortured. So this is a thing that happens, and I've heard about it, and it's really disturbing, and it's still happening. Here's a part of the separation wall that Israel built around the camp. You can see the camp's on this side, there's a watchtower. On the other side is mostly uninhabited land, because part of the strategy of the Israeli occupation is to deny Palestinians access to the land around their own communities. Most Israeli settlements are strategically placed around Palestinian communities to prevent their expansion. You can see now some of these settlements and where the place they were built. The blue areas are Jewish-only settlements constructed by the Israeli government on Palestinian land and protected by the Israeli police or the Israeli army. You can see where this was built here and here. There's ones down here too, basically preventing Bethlehem and Beit Zahor from expanding, preventing a lot of these communities from expanding. In the red is the separation wall. So this is called the Green Line. This is the armistice line in 1948. Everything on this side of the line, according to international law, is Palestine. However, because the Israeli army controls that, the Israeli army built well into the Green Line in order to deny Palestinians access to Jerusalem. So again, part of the living under a military occupation means you're living in a system of control. Here's kind of what it looks like going through some of the checkpoints. That's me on the right. Fortunately, I was able to go through during the day. If you were here at 4 in the morning, there'd be hundreds, if even 1,000 Palestinians lined up at 4 in the morning to go in and work for a day's wages, and then they have to go back and be back, you know, by the evening. However, that's probably not happening as much right now. Israel canceled most of the work permits after October 7th, so leading to a big labor shortage. So this is my teacher's house. The Israeli confiscated his backyard and built this huge surveillance tower in his backyard. It's just like, the things you see there are just insane. It's absurd, honestly. It's like this spaceship in his backyard. Yeah, there's a settlement. There's an Israeli settlement like right over there, so that's why they built it. But. So this is not actually Nelson Mandela. This was a graffiti artist, but this is the wall that it separates Bethlehem from Jerusalem. Actually, you can't even see how high the wall is in my picture, but you can see how high the car is. It's about 30 feet high. It's much higher than the Berlin Wall, much longer. But yeah, you know, people make humor out of really terrible situations, so just, you know, public art. Coincidentally, a lot of Israeli military contractors sell technology for the southern border of the United States, technology that is kind of tested in the West Bank and Gaza. Another martyr, this is a nurse that was shot by an Israeli sniper while she was evacuating wounded Palestinians in Gaza in 2018. In 2018, there was a movement in Gaza called the Great March of Return. When I was living there, thousands of Palestinians marched to the separation fence, and many of them were shot and killed. The other thing was many of them were intentionally shot in the knee, so they would be disabled for life, about 5,000 of them. So she's a martyr. She was a nurse, and you would see, at that time, you would see Razan, I think Najjar was her last name. This is a very joyous day. My friends all had permits miraculously, so we went into Jerusalem just for the day. Really happy we did that. Had to wait in the checkpoint for almost 2 hours, but we managed to make it through. I think because it was Ramadan. They're Christians though, but okay. So I was having a lot of emotions when I lived there, and I wrote some poetry. So I'll read my poem. The Walls of Jerusalem. I crumpled a piece of paper and shoved it into the western wall. Amid the rhythmic Torah chanters bobbing their heads in submission, the settler watched me, his sacrament slung by his side. Its sight metal, its barrel black, gaping, swallowing up life. I wonder if he saw my prayer. On the walk back to the bus, sweets and spices suffused the air. Damascus gate, hewn of ancient stone, now abutted by a surveillance tower. I walked to Bethlehem through the checkpoint. I saw the refugee from Jaffa press his thumb into the machine, shuffle past the faded poster, visit Jaffa. I traced the path of the other wall, adorned with art of solidarity and liberation. We paid for this wall, but got it painted for free. This wall, our modern God, the illusion of separation, the only thing we have separated ourselves from is God. I stopped at the watchtower, its glass panels like the eye of Sauron, a panopticon with a metal mouth that belches tear gas, made in the USA. The tower, an all-seeing eye, and then a real set of eyes. I saw myself in the eyes of the soldier. I prayed for him. I prayed for us. So, I'll stop there. I'll say I don't think that it's fun also to be forced to join the Israeli army as an 18-year-old and to police and poke and prod around 70-year-old women and order them off the bus. And it's not good for anyone. You know, there's a power imbalance here, but it's not good for anyone. And I'm here for humanity, and right now it means that I have to convey this experience to you. So here's a map of kind of what's happened to, Palestinian sovereignty over the last about 100 years. Here's just some facts about Gaza. Gaza was a place I was never allowed to go to because it's been under a blockade for about 25 years. I would have loved to have gone there. I have some Facebook friends in Gaza who are living in tents right now, if they're lucky. So this was before the, so Gaza's been bombarded 5 times in the last, 25 years. I think there is obviously, violent resistance coming out of Gaza. And I think that the only way this is going to stop is if there's like an actual, real path forward that respects Palestinians and their rights. But, how do we get there? So, you can take action. You can wear a t-shirt, You can yell at senators. You can shut down weapons manufacturers. There's people in Montana that are, speaking out. John Tester's the chair of the Senate Appropriations Defense Subcommittee. A lot of the weapons that are being sent to Israel are being signed off on by John Tester. John Tester has taken a lot of money from pro-Israel lobby. If you want to support the schools that I worked in, you can, check out this website. I was going to stay in Palestine. I got my dream job. I was going to work for the University of Notre Dame study abroad program. I went back to Montana for the summer to go do the Missouri River breaks, do Montana. I went to Indiana. I didn't know Notre Dame was in Indiana until I was there. And my boss was like, you can stay with me for a week. And 2 months later, visa denied. You can look at me, very dangerous. Yeah, it's very common, experience. I got a little taste of the Palestinian experience. So I ended up in Indiana for a year, which was fine. I made some friends. Let's see if I skip the picture. This was 2017 to 2018, so it's been a while since I've been there. But wanted to just encourage everyone to, keep learning, do what they can. You can follow us on Facebook at MT for Palestine and TikTok, Instagram. Host a film screening. You can do a lot of things. Tomorrow we're going to do a little rally if you want to join. So you can put your email by the door if you'd like to join. But I'll stop there and encourage everyone to pray for the peace of Jerusalem and to just stand up for humanity. Half the people in Gaza are at risk of starvation right now. 1 out of every 100 people in Gaza is dead, and most of it's with U.S. weapons. Thank you very much.
This is ad hoc. Sarah doesn't know I'm doing this. Before we take questions, I would just like to say that there's tragedy all over, and what happened on October 7th was a tragedy. What's happening in Gaza is a tragedy. And I'd just like everyone to join me in a moment of silence as we all wish for peace. Thanks everybody so much, and now we'll have some questions. I can
Yeah.
I have one question quick.
Sure.
What was the information on that demonstration tomorrow with flash on very quickly?
Oh yeah, I'll go back to it. There you go.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah.
Did you, as a Montanan who grew up here and had some, even though you're white, had some understanding of the sort of history of dehumanization of the indigenous people, and seeing that sort of parallels in your experience in Palestine, and really, when we dehumanize, then we don't take other people's lives as seriously as people just like us.
Yeah, that's great. I think, and by the way, thank you for, sorry, who was it that just stepped up? Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, October 7th was a tragedy. War crimes were committed. I mean, people were slaughtered. I don't dispute any of that. I'm just here to convey a perspective that's, not as often conveyed in the media. Yeah, I think that I just wanted to start by saying, I think when I realized, a few months ago, I was actually just trying to save my own humanity. I was like, I think that when we dehumanize others, we have to kill a little part of ourselves. And that's not to say that the people who are dehumanized are oftentimes, slaughtered and killed. But yes, I mean, the pattern of settlement of Montana by white settlers is very similar to what's happening in Palestine in terms of the mechanics of it and the containment of populations in smaller and smaller and smaller areas and denying them access to subsistence. The reason that food and water and electricity and gas could be shut off to Gaza suddenly on October 7th, still mostly shut off after 80 days, is because of that process. So there are definite parallels. That's why a lot of indigenous people in Montana are at the forefront of advocating for Palestinians. Yeah.
I was wondering, louder, sorry. Actually, the infrastructure, I wanted to just say, it's because those were Israeli settlements in Gaza, and when they pulled out, they left the stuff behind, and it's connected to Israel, and that's the reason. Sometimes people think it was a means of controlling the Palestinians, but it was actually belonged to the Israelis first. And then when they left that stuff in place. But I was wondering what you think about, in the West, we always talk about a two-state solution. How much do the Palestinians believe in that you talk to, or would they talk politics with you?
Oh, so you said a lot. I mean, I'll respond by saying that, the settlements in Gaza were about 5,000 settlers with swimming pools on the best land, surrounded by over 1.5 million Palestinians. It's one of the reasons Gaza is called a concentration camp. I say that with no problem saying that. The second thing you said is, do the Palestinians want peace? The answer is yes.
Do they want one state or two?
I think the problem is there's 600,000 Israeli settlers in the West Bank, guarded by Israeli soldiers with machine guns. And if you want to imagine a city the size of Great Falls, everyone uprooting and leaving, which is what would be required for a two-state solution to happen, would be a good portion of the Israeli settlers will leave the West Bank. Great, but I don't think that's going to happen in the current situation. I think that what's likely to happen is, unfortunately, a slow, long struggle against apartheid, which is what major human rights organizations argue and have extensively documented is the situation in Israel and Palestine.
So do the Palestinians, they don't want any Israelis there? I mean, they almost want the reverse of what the Israelis are doing almost, don't they? They want to get rid of them. It seems like it's a stalemate.
Yeah, it's an interesting in these conversations, and I think part of the history of, a horrific history of anti-Semitism and a lot of the education that was done in the West was done, and I think people in the West have a sensitivity towards that, not to say there's not real threats of anti-Semitism, and anti-Semitism has increased in the last few months, and everyone here should stand against that. And the people that I organize with, a lot of them are Jewish people, like Jewish people who I stand, at the front with. So, having said that, I think it's important to see what's happening, which is that there are over 1 million Palestinians displaced from their homes in Gaza because of bombs. And so I think that, a lot of Palestinians, to be honest, I don't think they want those people, the Israeli soldiers, forcing them out of their homes and taking their land. But I think that, honestly, from living there, I don't think there's going to be any solution in which people have to leave. And I think that the only way that's going to come is through international pressure. And I just hope that the United States can do more to make this happen, because right now it's not happening. Yeah.
So you mentioned this whole situation. People say, "Oh, the Palestinians, they're happy there in Israel, and it's productive in Israel. That land is better than it's ever been." And are there Palestinians who live in Israel? Are they citizens of Israel? And people say, "Oh, well, part of the government is Palestinian."
It's a great question. You're correct. 20% of Israel's population are Palestinian citizens. They do generally carry Israeli citizenship. And you're correct that they are allowed to vote, and that some of them served in the Knesset. Up until the last election, there was never a Palestinian party allowed to be a part of the governing coalition of Israel. the pattern, there hasn't been a Palestinian community built within Israel since 1948. So within Israel itself, the best analogy we have is like Jim Crow, something like close to that. In 2018, the Israeli government passed a law that was called the Jewish Nation State Law. And this law demoted Arabic as an official language, and it said the only people with the rights to national rights in this land are the Jewish people. So it denied the system of rights in Israel and Palestine is complex. It's true that the Palestinians who live within Israel are treated better than the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza. It's also still true they're second-class citizens within Israel. Thank you for your question.
So can you see across the Sea of Galilee?
You can, yeah. I'm going to just take questions from people who haven't asked yet. But yes, please, in the back.
I'm just curious, I'm just asking because it's hard to separate what's real from what's propaganda.
Yeah.
I've heard that in like the West Bank, there are some like roads and streets where Palestinians are not allowed to drive on them, and then there are some that like they are. Is that true? Or is
It's
that
true,
just-
yeah. And one of the cities is called Hebron, and the Israeli, there's an Israeli settlement in the heart of Hebron. Hebron is an ancient city holy to all three faiths. It's the birthplace, or it's the tomb of the patriarch Abraham. And because of that, in the 1970s, some Israelis went in and took over a hotel, and because of that, the Israeli army moved in and created a settlement in the heart of the city. And to protect that settlement, the Israeli army shut down the main street and only allows Israelis or Westerners to walk on it. In addition to the many bypass roads Israel has built for Jewish Israelis to access settlements in the West Bank, which is part of the reason for the checkpoints, so that they ensure that Palestinians who have their green license plates in the West Bank are not allowed to go down these roads. So another reason why human rights organizations have called it apartheid.
And I'm not saying leadership because leadership is a good thing. It's the leaders who want attention, they want power, they want control, they want money, they want to be reelected. And what we're seeing here is a continuation of the lack of humanity that we're seeing around the world. And it just breaks my heart when I compare things to when I was a little kid and it was just the opposite, you know? So I appreciate what you have found living with the Palestinians. And, you know, as, I don't know if he's still here, I don't care. But when people can't listen to the other side, that's when wars break out. That's when people die. And, you know, it's probably never going to be any different. But there are a lot of Israelis who cannot tolerate their leader. There are a lot of Palestinians who don't like Hamas.
Right.
And we have to look at this and say, this is what we're living with right now. And we pray, we send aid, and so on and so forth. But it's a tough world that we live in.
I agree with everything you said. You had your hand up first, yeah.
First of all, I do again commend you for your nuanced presentation of the information here, in addition to your very straightforward experience, you know, as it is. And the director as well, you know, thank you for having this opportunity for us to come together for this. Now, I do preface this by saying that I am aware that the ELCA is a lot more open and understanding of interdenominational differences. However, I'm just curious, how did this experience affect your perspective and your kind of understanding of people not only outside of the Lutheran denomination, but outside of the Christian faith?
Oh, great question. Yeah. So I grew up in Great Falls, and, you know, Christian, there aren't many people of other faiths here in Great Falls. And I got to college and I realized I wanted to learn more, and I studied the history of Islam in Missoula, and that led me on a long journey of, you know, interfaith work, and ultimately led me to travel to the Middle East, learn Arabic, and I'm in awe of the, you know, religion of Islam and of the prophetic tradition of Judaism. And I think that there's a very strong basis for peace building. In fact, I work as a student services manager at seminary in Connecticut, Christian, Muslim, Jewish seminary, and we do that. We do that, and we don't always get along. In fact, we disagree, and we do things like taking a deep breath after someone says something that's on their heart. What that gentleman said back there, I'm glad he said it. He said his piece and he left. I think we all need to learn to express our emotions in a nonviolent way. And I find that I'll speak about Islam because I, studied it and have many Muslim friends and have even prayed with Muslims many times. I really find it appealing, and the idea Islam itself just means, submission to God's will. And I think that as a Christian, I think I find myself feeling that way more and more. I find myself feeling, called to something greater. And that's why I'm here today too. Actually, this is not comfortable for me to be up here. I know people are not exactly excited about what I'm saying, and I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that reason. So I think that we all have something to learn from the other, especially other faiths. And I don't see Christianity as being exclusive. In fact, I think that my Christianity calls me to be in community with Muslims and Jews and people of other faiths too, indigenous folks. So shukran, thank you for your question. Yes, sir. Yeah.
First, just a clarification, the 20% roughly of the Jewish or Israeli population that is Muslim, do they live in Israel proper, or are they?
Yeah, so
okay.
Some of them are
Christians.
Christians.
They own a house, or?
I'll just say 20% are Palestinian, because some of them are Christians, some are Muslims.
Okay.
They live in cities like Haifa, Jerusalem, Lid. So in 1948, about 100,000 Palestinians remained in Israel for various reasons. In one case, in Nazareth, the Catholic Church intervened and prevented the Israeli army from expelling them. And so, yes, they own houses, some of them own land.
Okay.
However, in the 1970s, the Israeli government confiscated a lot of their land. And that there's a commemoration called Land Day for Palestinian Israelis to remember when a lot of their lands were confiscated in the 70s.
Okay, I have another one too.
Sorry, I'm going to have to
right.
go to someone else.
Just a quick question. What do you think some of the biggest disconnect is between what people think about what was going on there versus what's actually going on there? And what do you think causes that disconnect?
So can you help, so people hear what they think about what's going on there versus what's actually going on there?
Yeah.
What's the cause of the disconnect? I think it's the media, to be honest. I don't think the media has been very good these last few months. I think you have a responsibility to investigate claims and sources and not to repeat things that don't have any basis in evidence or fact. And I'm not saying that everything that's been said is not true, but just that I have personally been horrified. So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Have you been in touch with the people that you lived with there? And
yeah, I talked to my friends, my Christian friend from Bethlehem, Beit Jala. I called him on Christmas, and it was a hard conversation. The Palestinian Christian community canceled Christmas celebrations, the Christians of Bethlehem. Again, if you're a Christian, I encourage you to listen to the Christians of Bethlehem, the place of Jesus' birth. They have a very interesting theology. I think that it's probably important to listen to the Christians that descend from, Jesus. And they're mourning right now. Like, my friends has relatives in the church in Gaza in which two people sheltering in that church were shot by Israeli snipers a few weeks ago. My other friend from Bethlehem, 10 members of her best friend's family were killed when the Israeli Air Force bombed the Orthodox Church in Gaza. So that's another reason why I'm here. I mean, because I'm hearing these stories from my friends, and it's heartbreaking. Yeah, and many Israelis are dying too. Many Israelis died on October 7th, were killed. Some of them were slaughtered. Israeli soldiers are dying in the Gaza Strip. It's a tragedy too. I'm horrified by the loss of human life. I'm just not sure that what's going on now is the way to get out of it. Yeah. Yeah, Greg.
What are the gun laws over there?
The gun laws, yeah, that's a great question. If you're Palestinian, it's pretty hard to get a gun, especially in the West Bank. If you're a settler, they hand them out like candy. There's a video of the Israeli, Ben Gvir, the Israeli interior minister, just handing out assault rifles, which is one of the reasons why this sale of assault rifles to Israel has been held up, actually, by the Biden administration. I think I'll take a few more questions because I don't want to keep people too long. Yeah, unless people want to stay, I'm happy to stay here for a long time, but, you know, I know it's, yeah, Deb, yeah.
I'm kind of pleading ignorance here, I guess, on politics in Palestine, but how did Hamas come to power? And
Yep, great
were they
question.
voted in by the people? Were they, and did the majority of Palestinians wish to get rid of them?
So support for Hamas has generally increased in Palestinian society since October 7th, according to polling. More Palestinians in the West Bank support Hamas than Palestinians in Gaza. You know, Palestinians in the West Bank live partially under the control of Hamas, although, you know, Israel enforces the blockade around Gaza with, if you give birth to a baby in Gaza, you have to go register it with the Israeli army still. That's kind of the nature of the occupation. But to get back to your question, how did Hamas start? So Hamas started as an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is a charitable organization that operates in, you know, Muslim countries in the Middle East, kind of in opposition to a lot of the governments in the Middle East, and trying to kind of set up a parallel structure of government, the Muslim Brotherhood. Because of that, the Muslim Brotherhood has been repressed by governments in the Middle East, and especially in Egypt. And after 1948, the Egyptian army controlled Gaza up until 1967. So because of that, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt had a presence in Gaza. After 1967, Israel occupied the Gaza Strip, and that link was kind of severed. And the Muslim Brotherhood in Gaza started to branch off a bit. And Hamas was actually generally a nonviolent movement up until kind of like around the days of the first Intifada. And then Hamas came to the conclusion that violent resistance is the right of the Palestinian people, and it's also the only way they're going to regain like what they lost. And so because of that, Hamas was actually, in certain cases, the Israeli government helped Hamas gain power at the expense of the Palestinian Authority, of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which at that time diplomatically had become the sole legitimate representative of the Palestinian people. This was Yasser Arafat. I have a freedom fighter's gun and an olive branch, United Nations. So Hamas rejected that. They said this is the path of, you know, compromise, or whatever you want to call it. And Israel, according to, again, Palestinian analysts, does not want to see a unified Palestinian national movement. Hamas has its own agency. I'm not one to say, like, there's people that will say Israel created Hamas. It's not true. Like, Israel did aid Hamas. They allowed Hamas to gain power, and then, in some ways, and then what happened is depends where you're coming from. You know, Palestinian nationalists would probably say the occupation got worse, and the peace process at the same time failed. So remember, in 1993, Bill Clinton shaking hands with Yasser Arafat and Yitzhak Rabin, and this was supposed to be like the path to peace. And unfortunately, it didn't work out. That's another story, complicated story. But that failed. So the prospects for Palestinian statehood were done. And in response to that, Hamas began organizing more violent resistance, including suicide bombings within Israeli cities. And that that led to an even harsher Israeli retaliation, and that led to the situation in which we're in today, in which Hamas in 2006 ran in the Palestinian national elections. They actually participated in the same Palestinian political body, which they sort of used to reject. Now, some people view that as a sign that Hamas was actually signaling its willingness to compromise or to reconcile by participating in the elections for the Palestinian Liberation Organization. In those elections in 2006, Hamas won the elections. In response, the US and Israel